The viewpoints expressed on Night Fright are not necessarily those of the host, the staff, the sponsors, or the affiliate stations. Tonight's program may contain graphic themes or images. Viewer discretion is advised.
There is a time for question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Welcome to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for that. You're all quiet. Oh, you look great, by the way.
Oh,
Just
thanks.
saying. Nice job. Okay, folks, we're gonna go now. Ready? Everybody ready? Ready, Freddy? Showtime! Welcome to the show. I'm Brent Holland, and welcome one and all to Night Fright. Get that coffee going, or the tea, or a beverage of choice. Settle in your most comfy chair and get ready for a ride like none other into the deep, deep forest. Outside, folks, the studio, the leaves have begun to change. They're coming down now. They're falling on paths in the forest. And tonight there's a constant drizzle. It's damp out there, and you can see your breath. You know the type of night I'm talking about. Miserable, miserable night. Great night to settle in and listen to this show, because hands up everyone who has ventured forth onto a dark path in conditions like tonight. Now, did you feel like you were being watched? Was there someone's or something's eyes following you everywhere you went, just beyond the light, where the shadows begin? Was there a noticeable rustling behind you? Well, you may not be alone in the woods after all. Linda Godfrey returns with her new book, Monsters Among Us, an exploration of otherworldly Bigfoots, Wolfmen, portals, phantoms, and odd phenomena. Linda Godfrey has been researching unexplained phenomena for over 23 years now. That's right, folks. She started when she was 6 months old. She has penned over a dozen books on the paranormal. Fans of this show will know that Linda's been on here before, and you can find her show as well as all the other shows in the archives at www.nightfrightshow.com. Linda, it is so good to see you again, my friend. How are you?
Great, thanks. How are you, Brent?
I'm good, thank you. Shall we jump in right away? 2 feet first, as they say?
Sure, dive into the monster pool.
Oh.
We've got very strong, ironclad bathing trunks.
Well, I live on Lake Ontario, so it's a little chilly these days to get in there. But anyways,
Yes.
just saying, you know, if that's what needs to do, if there's a monster coming, it's always a good escape route, right? Right into the water. And but I don't know, do they swim? Anyway.
Some do.
Oh, we got to get into that too then.
Swimming
Okay.
Bigfoot.
Bigfoot swims?
I have a story about one, yes. A really compelling story.
Oh, well, let's go there right away then. That's not where I was going to begin, but that's fine if you want to tell it.
Okay, sure. I am wearing my, I don't know if you can see it, I'm wearing my Michigan Bigfoot shirt. So,
Can you stand up for a second for us to see it?
sure. You can see it says Michigan Bigfoot.
Right
There it is.
on, right on.
So, yeah, this is a very long story in the Monsters Among Us book, and it's one of the most compelling Bigfoot encounters I've ever seen anywhere in my life, and I just happened to be the person this man contacted. The retired math teacher from Chicago, okay, and this actually happened some decades ago, and he's carried this with him his whole life, never got over it, and finally told me about it. This occurred, mind you, along the Des Plaines River Conservation Area, 1 mile east of O'Hare Airport in Chicago. So we're not talking about, deep wilderness or anything like that. It is pretty, left natural. I found wolf prints on the day I went to meet him there and interview him in person and see where it all happened. But as it happened, he was riding a new bike that he had gotten and along this bike path, and just decided to sit down and look at the sun come up over the river. So he put the bike down, kind of sat in the weeds, and he hears the splashing, and he looks across the river, which isn't all that wide or all that deep at that point, and he sees this creature coming just leisurely out of the woods, reaches up his hand for some vines, pulls it down, looks like it chews on it for a minute or so, and he's just sitting there, his breath, not knowing what he's seeing, because it's, like 6-7 feet tall, covered with fur. It's a Bigfoot. And unfortunately, he had bad hay fever, and he had sat in a nice patch of ragweed next to the shore. And so he had to cough and sneeze, and that got the creature's attention. It swam across the river. He didn't really realize at first. He saw it go in the water, and then the next thing he knew, he thought at that point, well, I better change places. I better find a better place to hide. So he did that. The creature came across the river, thought that he was still in the original place, and started picking up huge flat river rocks, holding them over its head and heaving them at this guy, who luckily was not sitting. He said it was a dead aim. It would have gotten me if I'd still been in the same place. And then to his horror, he has to cough again. And the thing's head just snaps around at him. And he said at that point, because his fur was all wet, he could see its ears. Nobody almost ever sees the Bigfoot's ears. He said they were small. They were like human ears, except they were pointed a little bit on top. And its eyes were sort of reddish, but he caught like this glint in them, and it was looking back and forth like it was a little bit, having a little bit hard time with the light, with the morning light and the sunlight. So he had to leave the weeds again because it knew where he was, and it started chasing him, chased him all the way down the path almost to where the parking lot was. And he said by that point he was so terrified because he figured it was going to get him. He said there's no way. It was close enough. He couldn't understand why it hadn't gotten him already. And he started crying out to God to save him. And at that point, he doesn't know if it slipped back into the water or jumped into the woods on the other side of the path or disappeared. He didn't see it. It just was gone. And he was left, with his terror. But there's a lot more to that story. And there's actual history connected with the site, relevant history. And one thing that I was trying to do in this book was take incidents that people had encountered strange creatures and look to see if there were anomalous happenings attached to them. And lo and behold, I found a really close in time and in space UFO sighting by two people very nearby, and it just seemed too close to be a coincidence. And it was a very good sighting where they had a good long look. It was a nuts and bolts type of thing, not just a light ball. And it was fairly close to the ground. It was cruising over some phone lines not too far away.
Do you find this often with a lot of the reports? I'll tell you why. Last week we had a guest on and we were talking about how demons, John Ventry, he has a television show on TV called Hangar One. And he says he's being haunted in his home, demonized, if you will. And he said every time it happens, there's usually a UFO sighting associated with it. Are you finding more and more of these sightings that are being reported to you?
That's why I decided to do this book, because there's so many more than I ever received. And I realized if I ignored them or said, well, who knows if that had anything to do with it, I was ignoring potential evidence, and not really investigating, but just kind of supporting my own biases. And so I decided to look at every single one and scrutinize it for anything that was reported or maybe not reported. If there was a good date, I would check the moon phase and go through all the UFO reports of that time and date and solar flares and see what I could come up with. And not that this book, even at 368 pages, is big enough to be statistically provable or relevant, but it's a start. And yeah, I just found a lot more of these things, and poltergeist activities in the homes of people who have these types of encounters and sightings were really quite frequent. That was surprising to me too.
So this is phenomenal research, and it's painstakingly slow. I realize that, because you have to find all these things. Were there surprise correlations that you found?
Well, first of all, I didn't see any correlation between full moons and creature sightings.
Yeah, that surprises me, because all
Yes.
through folklore, it's always
Right.
the full moon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the 3/4 moons were the most prevalent when there was a date known that I could check the moon phase.
I'm just wondering, too, if when the UFOs show up, there's a lot of speculation, Linda, that when they do show up, they come through a portal. Now, I'm not certain if Bigfoots would be considered aliens or if they would be considered their own creatures, but I'm wondering if they're piggybacking coming through the porthole somehow.
Well, I don't think there's any way we can know that for sure right now, but a lot of people think that they are somehow connected to the UFOs, and that they and the UFOs come out of the same portal. You know, there are what John Keel called window areas, where it's almost like there is a portal there, and that's where you see the groups of man-wolf sightings, the Bigfoots, the UFOs, Mothman. All these things tend to show up, you know, places like Point Pleasant, Virginia, where you had all of those things. Many UFOs, the flying creatures, some creatures flying, men in black, you name it. It all seemed to show up through this window area. And what would a window be but an opening into another world? And that's basically, you know, what people, how people would describe a portal.
Now, let's talk about another one of your stories that's in the book, Monsters Among Us, an exploration of otherworldly Bigfoots, Wolfmen, portals, phantoms, and odd phenomena. Folks, www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on tonight's guest book cover. That'll take you right to a spot where you can order it from the warmth and the comfort of your own home. You don't have to go down that path, folks, to get the book. Linda Godfrey's our guest tonight, and the author as well. There's another story I'd like you to tell of, folks. It's a virtually transparent 8-foot creature. Now, he's been seen by nearly 50 people in a single community, folks. 50 people, 50 witnesses. This isn't somebody out with some moonshine in the middle of an evening. Let's put it that way. 50 folks have seen this. Can you tell that story for us, Linda?
And I'm trying to think, I've got a couple of I've got a whole chapter called The Invisibility Question.
Okay, let's talk about that in a global sense then. How's that?
Yeah, because I'm trying to figure out, I've got a couple of stories,
Well, tell them when you're most
believe it or
familiar
not,
with.
that's your description, and I'm trying to figure that out. But
Tell them when you're most familiar with, that's all.
okay, well, there's one that I really had a lot of fun with, because it involved both an invisible one and a visible one. And they were both experienced by the same woman who lived in Tennessee, I'm believing. And the first one occurred a couple of decades ago, when she and a gal friend and their 2 boyfriends were walking through the woods, and they found themselves being stalked by something invisible in the wood line next to them. They would walk, it would walk. They would stop, it would stop. And they could tell by the sound of the crunching that it was extremely large. Didn't seem to mind if they heard it crashing through, you know, in the intervals when they were walking. And then all of a sudden, they heard it rushing out of the woods toward them. And it rushed right at them. The only reason they knew this was that they could feel it touching them almost as it ran past. It never stopped, just ran right through them, as if, not literally through them, but between them is probably a better word, as if they weren't there, ran off into some other woods and left. And so they'd heard it all along. It finally comes at them. They think they're going to see it. They can hear it coming at them perfectly well. and see and hear where it goes, but it never showed its body to them. And yet it was there, right in front of 4 sets of eyes.
What do you think? What's your speculation on it? How does it match up to other stories like that?
Well, I think that some of these creatures don't exist in one solid given reality. In other words, we're always flesh and blood. You know, we think that, oh, we're flesh and blood, and then there are ghosts or phantoms which are never flesh or blood. But I think there may be a sliding scale. And especially for these creatures that come from, you know, another dimension or world, perhaps they can be less, quote unquote, real when they want, and then solidify when they need to eat, procreate, do things that require muscle, solid muscle. It's the only terms with all these stories, you know, and makes some sense.
Are they creepy? Are they out for no good? There's a story here that you can share, and the reason why I asked this, it's about a shapeshifter who tried to lure a young girl into a manhole. And that's terrifying to me, to think I may have a daughter out there and be vulnerable to something like that. Can you tell that story?
Sure. This was in Torrance, California. And again, it was a couple decades ago. She's a young woman now. And she and her brother were elementary age, and they were playing outside this laundromat while their mother was doing the clothes. They had this new Nerf ball that they were playing with, and they were just really into kind of testing it out. You know, they weren't thinking about much. And all of a sudden, she noticed that there was this manhole with like a big square cover, and the lid was slowly raising, and there was this man staring at her and the brother. And it started trying to start a conversation with her. And she's kind of backing away, and it called her Jennifer. And she didn't know that it had, she was sure, in fact, that it had not heard her name because her brother had never said it. And as she watched him, he saw a little bit, and she saw some fur start to form on his face. It seemed like his clothes, he was wearing this sort of, remember the puffy shirt on Seinfeld? He was wearing a shirt that reminded me of that, according to her description. And he said, no, not now. And yet he still kept transforming and trying still to get her over to that manhole. And she managed to back away from it. Her brother came over and, you know, she joined him. And they were both just terrified because he saw it too. And they managed to get out of there. And she gave me a lot of information as to exactly where it was. I was able to be on Google Maps and confirmed every detail of the configuration of this area, the other businesses that were nearby. And my one thought was, my husband is a civil engineer who specializes in things like sanitary treatment. And he had always said to me, you know why manholes are always round? It's so the cover won't fall in. It can be just a little larger, but it won't fall in. That's the only shape that won't. Yet this one was square, so I thought, oh, maybe there's a chink in the armor in this story. But when I described it to him, he said, oh yeah, that's the blah, 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 blah. We use that for, you know, when there's certain things, or maybe that probably was led to maintenance stairs. And she did say that she could see down the hole enough to see that he was standing on some kind of metal ladder type of thing. And that evidently, you know, there was another space down there.
Any ideas what the creature wanted with the little girl?
None, but no idea, but I can't imagine that it was any good thing.
No, that's terrifying to me. And there has been other stories as well where people have, well, as you just described, the Bigfoot with the big rock attacking human beings. Is this more common than we think? Are they predators?
Well, they're certainly predators to things like deer. Bigfoot and Dogman are frequently seen chasing or carrying a deer, you know, a part of a deer carcass, or after one, or something else. When it comes to humans, I know there have been a few instances where people felt that they had been attacked. There certainly have been many reports given to me where people were sure they were going to be attacked, just like this young man that was being chased by the Bigfoot. He could hear its breath. It was making some kind of a strange Bigfoot language noise, like he described it as it's like habada, 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 habada. I don't have a deep enough voice to really reenact. Yeah. Oh, that's it. You must have heard one. Yeah.
I do have hair in my chest, you know. That's as far as I go towards a big. You can call me Stinkfoot, but maybe not Bigfoot.
So yeah, boy, that's got me right off track here.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, we were talking about the fact that they're predators, and I'll expand on that because the two stories you've just told. You know, when I first heard the Bigfoot story, I thought, well, it may be a mother Bigfoot protecting her young, but no, because she had to, or he had to swim across the lake. He purposely, or she purposely, it purposely wanted to attack this young man. It wasn't just a warning, it wasn't protection at all. They were going out of their way. And by luring, the other story was luring this little girl into the manhole. Once again, they're up to no good, nefarious reasons. So that's why I was always curious. It's coming as a bit of a surprise to me.
Well, the one in the manhole is kind of a different thing than most people see for the upright canines. Usually they behave, and I believe most of the Bigfoot behave in a way that is aggressive towards people who are trespassing the territory. And that's why, it's the only reason I can think of as to why they scare people and dive away once they've got them out of their area. There was another part to that story with the Bigfoot, which was that on the other side of the shore, there were several other Bigfoot individuals who were howling and yelling at the young man. Interpreted it as being that they were yelling for him to come back, or, why are you, messing around with this human, you foolish young man, that kind of thing, you foolish young Bigfoot, because, now they'll know we're here. That's what I imagine they were saying. So this may have been an area where a family was residing, and he felt that he had been their invisibility breached, in terms of not actual invisibility, but the way that animals will hide in their environment. He had been seen, and he didn't want this, whoever it was that had noticed him, to bother his family. So I think that's just as likely as anything else.
You make a good point. I never thought of it like that. I guess there is a hierarchy. The children, and then you have the teenagers. This sounds like it would be a young teenage male full of testosterone, and how they like to race their cars and stuff. Not that I was ever like that, but they're always looking to show off their newfound strength and manhood and everything else. And I wonder if it was something like that. And
in many stories, that really fits the bill best. I mean, not everyone. There are exceptions, and where other researchers have interviewed people and come to a different conclusion. I don't contest that because I wasn't there. I wasn't the one to talk to them. So, I leave everybody to do their own research.
Monsters among us, my apologies. Monsters Among Us, an exploration of otherworldly Bigfoots, Wolfmen, portals, phantoms, and odd phenomena. Our guest tonight, Linda Godfrey, is also the author. www.nightfrightshow.com. There you will find her previous show with us, and also just click on tonight's guest book cover and the previous show's book cover. Get both books. You will not be disappointed. There are more people out there that are coming forward now more than ever. That's something, before we get into Utah and Skinwalker Ranch, that's something I wanted to ask you. I get asked this all the time. If there was a Bigfoot out there, by the way, folks, let me tell you this. Jane Goodall's been on this show. She believes in Bigfoot. Jane Goodall. Bingo. Okay? That's not a joke. She believes in Bigfoot, and the reasons she gives are fabulous, and it makes perfect sense. All that to say is, I get asked this all the time, Linda. Why isn't there any really good pictures of Bigfoot? Why isn't there any really good pictures of Dogman and all these other things? And, I mean, they're not going to stand there and pose, are they?
No, I don't think so. There are a couple of different aspects. One is that it is really hard to catch an unexpected animal on any kind of a handheld camera. Holding it up, flashing it. Trail cams should have a little better record because they're there, but it seems like both the Bigfoot and the Dogman can easily detect any sort of electronic system and avoid it or toy with it somehow. So that, in my own experience, I've almost given up on them because they'll be taking pictures right and left. You'll have squirrels, you'll have raccoons, you'll have, whatever, the neighbor's farm dog come up. And then when whatever the bait is removed, there's nothing. It's either a black screen, a white screen. In one case of my own trail camera, I had the trail cam was bent, or the whole a huge branch was bent back. I'm not sure which, so that it looked like all you saw was a view of the upper part of the tree that it was fastened to, and then the bait was gone. So they're skillful, but sometimes I wonder, if it is true that they exist on a sliding scale of reality, then perhaps they're electromagnetic fields, because we have electromagnetic fields.
Right.
All living things have electromagnetic fields of varying strength or weakness, and perhaps they're set at a slightly different frequency than our own. If they're coming from another place and they're just close enough to our reality that they can get around here, but they have to go back once in a while, perhaps there are times when, maybe most of the time, that their frequency is just a little off and our cameras are not set to capture them perfectly.
The JFK Assassination, the definitive book by Brent Holland. From inside the Oval Office to Daily Plaza, first-person witness accounts. Order yours right now. nightfrightshow.com.
Now I have to ask you this a little bit tongue-in-cheek. You set bait for these creatures and you go out there to look for them with a camera? Now, does your husband know you're doing this?
Yeah, he's been along a few times.
Oh, has he? Okay, good for him. So,
Not necessarily. Pardon? I'm sorry.
I was going to ask you, have you run into anything that's kind of not explainable, if you will?
Oh, sure.
Oh, can you tell us one of those?
Well, it was my first really big experience, which acted as sort of a set piece that from then on I continued to have sightings. And this was, if you want to see pictures, you can go to lindagodfrey.com, my blog, and either scroll down to July 2012, or you can search for Bigfoot Branch, because what I saw, I was out on a Sunday evening for a walk by myself. I didn't even have a camera with me. I just gone for a stroll, and I just got this inexplicable urge to, for the first time, to pick up a big stick and do a couple of tree knocks, because there's no one around. I knew there were no humans in sight. No one would hear me or think I was being idiotic. I just wanted to try it. Things in those woods that I knew were supposed to be Bigfoot signs, like 3 saplings rainbowed and arched and kind of fastened together with another branch on the ground. And where I was, it was southern edge of the Kettle Moraine area in Wisconsin, a place where the glacier scooped out these deep bowl-shaped impressions with ridges between them. And I pounded on this tree. I did it a couple of times, and then lo and behold, I got a knock back from a tree that was it was just on the other side of this kettle. I mean, I'm not talking along like a quarter mile or 1/8 of a mile or anything like that. And moreover, because I was on the ridge, and whatever was in this tree was about 40 feet up in the tree, which was growing out of near the bottom of the kettle, I was like eye level with it. And I knocked another time, and something else knocked.
Another time. Don't poke the bear.
I was thinking, okay, this is what's going through my mind. Only a human or a Bigfoot has an opposable thumb to hold a stick and knock a tree. Nothing else could do it. And I'm going to see this thing, I'll just run. I was close enough to the main path that I could have run away, I thought. By the time it came down the tree, although it probably could have just jumped out and one spring got me. But then I was answered with this giant cracking, splitting sound in 2 motions. First, this living oak branch with tons of foliage on it. It was not any dry, dead tree. Twisted it. Second one, it ripped it off away from the tree. This is an 8-inch diameter living oak, and threw it 40 feet down to. And at that point, I knew what it was. I knew for sure that it was a Bigfoot, and I left the area as quickly as possible. went
Nope.
home, but I went back. I was back in half an hour.
You brought a camera, right?
Best, the best part, I brought a camera.
So-
Okay.
You went back. Was it still in the surrounding areas?
Well, we weren't sure. We kind of looked around and we decided to tramp down there because I wanted to measure that branch. And more importantly, I wanted to find out if it was full of woodpecker holes or somebody had stupidly gone up in that tree and sawn part of it, which there have been no reason to do that. But I wanted to check it anyway. And we went down, we did that, and we could see the bare spots on the log where you could tell something had bent over and gripped it in just the kind of positions that it would have needed to in order to twist it, get that torque, and then rip it down. And I have one of the brand things that came off, or the bark that came off where it gripped it. So we had that, and then this overpowering smell came into the kettle, and it was like skunk-ish, but not skunk, not that bad, but mixed with sort of like sweet grass. And we're like, okay, this isn't good. So my friend and I walked up out of the kettle, and her daughter had been, who knows nothing about Bigfoot, she was just standing and looking at the view, and she screamed, and she actually had seen it. She saw it run behind some other foliage. And of course, by the time Sandra and I got up there and looked, it was out of sight, but she described it really well, not knowing anything about Bigfoot. She said it was moving fast, but she said it was like striding, and people always, when humans walk, we have this dunk, 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 our heads are bobbing, but the Bigfoot seems to kind of smoothly walk. And so we're craning our necks and trying to see where that. It was like this low, deep, warning thing where we could feel like we were the little mammals. It was going to leave immediately. And I said, ladies, it's time to get out of here. And so we did. And I have lots of pictures, with that. You can see the branch in the tree.
It was your niece that saw the Bigfoot. How is she psychologically? Is she okay? Like, was she in a bit of shock?
It was my friend Natalie, and she was pretty shaken up at the time. Now she kind of marvels at it that she saw it, but we were all pretty nervous at that time, in that moment.
Wow, what a story! That's incredible.
I did not sleep that night, not a bit. Could not sleep for a couple of nights.
And every creak you hear, you're wondering,
yes.
Did you write your address down?
I think it did follow me home because my office in that house was literally 10 feet from the drop-off into another kettle. Mm-hmm. So it had free range through the kettles, right close to my house. And within a few nights, if sitting up late in my office, there would be little pebbles and sticks hitting my window, wind or rain or anything like that.
Oh.
So.
Holy cow. Oh my. I would have been, just kind of, we're here letting you know, right? 2 quick questions. One is, do you think they secrete that smell? Because every time I talk to somebody about a Bigfoot, First Nations people usually, because for some reason, I don't know, maybe they feel more comfortable with First Nation people. There's a lot of sightings from First Nation peoples. Yeah. They always describe that smell, and I'm just wondering, like a skunk, if you will, we had mentioned a skunk before, perhaps that's a bit of a warning to let you know that, hey, we're here, we don't mean you any harm, perhaps, but stay away. And the other question I had for you, when you're out in the woods like that, do you carry bear spray or anything like that?
Well, the second one I'll answer first. I carry bear spray, dog spray, that kind of thing. It's just a little something, to give an edge. And I'll, walk softly and carry a big stick. I always like to look at a large stick that would be suitable for tree knocking. If I see one, I just use it as a walking stick. But that's it. I'm with people who are armed, though. Some people do carry a sidearm, and because.
Well, there's probably
not
mountain
creatures,
lions.
but because
I was going to say there's probably mountain lions, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we've been in. I have some colleagues that hike the Kettle Moraine with me, and we know kind of the place to go due to people that report things to me. And we've seen lots of mountain lion tracks, and there are packs of coyotes. There are probably a wolf or two passing through. So you want to, and humans. I mean, there are people growing things in those all of our state and national forests and parks, that shouldn't be in there. And so that much we do. And the first question was about whether they eject this.
Yes, secrete some kind of thing like a skunk as kind of a warning.
Yeah, it's like, yes, I call it being slimed. That happened to me and my colleagues, Sanjay Singhal, when we were on these trails. And I noticed this really unusual big tree by the side of the trail. And I said, that looks like something where a big thing could hide behind it or in it. Had so many branches. I said, I'm going to stop and check it out. So I walked around behind it. I found what looked like some hairs. I was getting my tweezers out. And as I did that, it was like it was on my face and my mouth. I could just barely breathe. I was gasping. I just bent over. I was gasping. And it was the same scent, skunk, kind of grassy, but much, much more strong and pungent than I had smelled.
Takes your breath away.
The first one, it did, yeah. I was turning around to warn Jay, and he was already doubled over, gagging, and we left. We thought that was a pretty strong warning.
Did you leave the fur there?
To leave the area. I think.
Or
Pardon?
Did you ever go and get the fur, or did you just leave it there and just walked away?
I looked again, but then the next time there wasn't anything, and it may have been part of a squirrel tail, for all I know. But whatever, I think I had intruded off the trail,
right.
And that was not appreciated.
Skinwalker Ranch. Can we talk about that one? It's pretty terrifying, folks. Just let me tell folks who we're speaking to. Folks, Linda Godfrey's returned, and she's as fantastic as ever. Her new book is called Monsters Among Us, an exploration of otherworldly Bigfoots, Wolfmen, portals, phantoms, and odd phenomena. www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's guest book cover, and also when she was here previously, click on that book cover as well, because you'll find a previous show with her and I in the archives. www.nightfrightshow.com. Also, I'm going to put a link to Linda's website there. She has referenced that several times tonight. So, glorious, glorious amount of information and pictures. So, for the non-believer, it might be worth your time to go there. And if you're into this type of thing, absolutely get there. Okay, can we talk about Utah Skinwalker Ranch?
Tom Kelleher and George Knapp were both there, and they collaborated on this book about this ranch land in Utah. I think it's the northeastern corner of it, if I'm not mistaken, where they plan to just nicely, quietly raise their prize cattle, and instead found themselves at the center of this virtual panorama of anomalous attacks. There were upright wolves, huge wolf animals, portals, strange lights, you name it, everything occurred at that place. And it finally drove the family out. It was that bad. And I hear and understand that there were actually other things that were not included in the book or for public knowledge. And it was taken over as HIFIC locale, where it was studied professionally with the very best monitoring and recording equipment that anyone could find. And what I was describing earlier with my little one single trail camera, that happened out there with multiple. At one point they had 6 state-of-the-art trail cams arranged in a circle facing one another with the show in the middle, and nothing could have happened with one of those being triggered and recording what was on the other side. And instead something tore up the wires, completely demolished the whole experiment, and nothing, of course, was recorded. So about 2 to 3 years ago, here in southeastern Wisconsin, a retired physics teacher from Chicago had bought a hayfield in not too far from where I lived, and he noticed that there was a strangely mutilated raccoon in his field one day, and that made him very curious. Because it had been sort of like cleanly, with a scalpel, opened from its chin down to its nether parts, and whatever, the entire innards were carefully held out like with 2 handfuls and laid on the ground next to it, which isn't normal. And he had something to do. When he came back 40 minutes later, insides were gone, as if something had come back, scooped them up in one. Now, if you've ever seen the sight of, a carcass being torn apart by the, small predators, the raccoons, the birds of prey, everything. Yeah, they tear,
rip it apart.
They each get through apart. Yeah, you'll find bits of skin and fur and flesh. There's nothing like that. And so he decided to begin experimenting, and he started with a 60-pound deer carcass that he found in Illinois, transported in his own truck, brought to his own land, perfectly legal at the time, everything that he did, and laid it there. And there was a mist that formed over the trail cam for about, the deer was gone. There were large bipedal wolf-like prints that evidently went over or through a barbed wire fence, carrying this thing on its shoulder, and he and a friend tracked it all the way through his field until it came to a road, and they lost, where it went. By the time we kind of finished doing those things, because some of the laws had changed, I think we were on the 17th carcass with different things happening to all of them. And we were able to correlate some of the mutilations to cattle mutilations in central Wisconsin. We had a picture that was sent to me from a reporter in central Wisconsin, taken by a farmer who had a cow that was mutilated exactly the same way as one of the deer in these situations. In both cases, their right leg quarters, their right front leg quarters were almost surgically cut away. There was no shredded skin, no bite marks, nothing, and then yanked off and removed. And the rest of it left, and this deer was swarming with maggots at the time. It was not any kind of condition that a human would want to eat it, so it wasn't human poaching, I'm quite sure of that. And yet what would make that beautiful, scalpel
precision. Linda Moulton Howe's been on the show, and I suspect you've probably been in contact with her and discussed various things. And, it's alarming. I've never heard this coming from this perspective. I've always only heard the alien phenomena. And more I'm finding all these phenomena, as I'd mentioned last week. John Ventry feels that alien abductions could be demons. More and more I see a convergence of all these phenomena coming together. And it's pretty terrifying. Have you seen a growth in the amount of reports you're receiving, and what do you attribute that to? I know you're more popular now than ever, and perhaps you've allowed more people to feel secure enough to come forward with their stories. But I'm wondering if there's another component involved in that too, if there's some kind of quickening.
You hear that term, the quickening, a lot.
Yeah.
And I have no way to say for sure. A lot of people do suggest that it's the final days, and when the beast shall be unleashed, and there will be wars and things like that. I don't know. I don't know that there's any way we can even tell that. And it may just be the big increase in something as simple as the fact that internet groups and chat groups and TV shows and radio shows have just sort of exploded on this topic in the last maybe 5, 4, 3 years just past. There's so much more, so many places to go, so much more information. As you say, people are emboldened to tell things that they would have just hidden and kept to themselves forever. So that may be part of it too. But in this case, I did just want to make that one corollary point that even that hayfield had the same odd anomalous things, the strange lights, the UFO type of sightings, what we felt was a portal. It was exactly as the orange structure described in Knapp's and Kelleher's book described. And then there was also, even at the end of it, there were several views of some kind of black furry something that could have been part of an arm or something, just standing right almost in front of the camera. So you have that same correlation. The target is these domesticated animals, and then all of these other anomalous happenings around it.
If a porthole opened up and you saw one go through, would you try to follow?
I don't know. There's no way to tell whether, let's say that they are in a different electromagnetic phenomena setting or something. I'm not sure that we would jibe with it. If so, maybe it would make us sick. Maybe we would never come back. We don't know these things. And so, the old saying, fools jump in where angels fear to tread. I think I'd rather, follow the angel's lead on this one and kind of fear to tread into anything that I wasn't sure I'd be able to function in. There are so many portals in popular media today. In my book, I mentioned a couple of times the Buffy and Angel series. They were always open and being able to breathe and function and, go about whatever they went there to do. But I'm not sure that it would work out that well for us if there is such a thing.
I want to thank Linda Godfrey for coming on the show tonight with her fantastic stories and great new book, folks. Monsters Among Us, an exploration of otherworldly Bigfoots, Wolfmen, portals, phantoms, and odd phenomena. www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on tonight's guest book cover. I'm Brent Holland from Night Fright. See y'all later. One last question, Linda. What is it that's growing on top of Donald Trump's head? Thank you so much. You take care, my friend.
Thanks for
You're listening to Night Fright and your host, Brent Holland. The time is now. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy.
The JFK Assassination, the definitive book by Brent Holland. From inside the Oval Office to Davy Plaza, first-person witness accounts. Order yours right now. NightFrightShow.com.